If hell had a back door, it would be hidden somewhere among the streets of Los Angeles, where darkness doesn't just fall after sunset, it swallows everything. Los Angeles, a city once called the Promised Land. Every year, millions flocked here chasing the hope of a new beginning, and the lights once blazed bright with the full glow of the American dream. But today, those once vibrant streets have become a no-go zone, a place where even the police hesitate to set foot. The law here has melted under the heat of despair, and people must live between poverty and sin, between survival and losing themselves. This isn't the aftermath of the apocalypse. This is America fading and falling apart night after night. In this video, we will bravely walk through the streets of Los Angeles at night to see the decay that America dares not face. Nights of sin. The streets are collapsing, and lost souls in the heart of paradise. Stepping into Los Angeles, there are streets so breathtakingly beautiful, where the lights reflect on the skyscrapers and the American dream still seems to flicker. But as you turn south onto Figueroa Street, especially near the 9100 S Figueroa intersection, that silence no longer comes from beauty, but from a completely different side, a dark side that America has never wanted to acknowledge. Do you see that woman in the revealing outfit standing near the Figueroa St. 9100 S sign? That's one of the ways people in this neighborhood make a living. Along the sidewalks, under traffic lights, and even in the middle of the road, it's not hard to spot beautiful girls in bold outfits. They stood there, waiting for something. It could be a guest, or it could be waiting for a miracle that never comes. They weren't standing there to fish for attention. They were standing there to survive. For many, it's the only way to get a hot meal or keep a roof over their heads tonight. And it's also the way Figueroa operates, where the dreams of the poor become the fuel for producing the luxury consumed by the rich. Local people call this place the Blade, a name that is both sharp and frighteningly true. It's not by chance, because living here, you're always walking on a knife's edge. Just one wrong step and you could fall into the depths of the system. A system where the law exists primarily on paper, where police cars silently glide by without stopping, where all moral principles become blurred between the lines of survival and personal choice. A report from the LAPD states that in 2025 alone, hundreds of incidents related to dangerous behavior and calls for service were recorded on the stretch of Figueroa from 85th to 104th Street. But most did not lead to prosecution. The people in this area, especially children and the elderly, are always living in a state of anxiety because everything is now gradually slipping outside the boundaries of the law.
If a city can allow thousands of people to live on the fringes of light, unprotected, unheard, and forced to choose between survival and dignity, what does that say about the very system we once trusted? Is it not that America is losing itself in a single day, but is silently rotting away each night on the very streets we dare not step onto?
Venice Beach, once hailed as California's coastal tourism capital, welcoming millions of visitors each year to bask in the majestic beauty of the ocean, golden sunshine, and seemingly endless white sandy beaches. That's what people usually see, the shimmering surface of a tropical paradise. However, right beneath that glamorous facade, Venice is hiding a completely different truth. Rows of makeshift tents, lost souls and sighs carried away by the sea wind, unheard by anyone. No one would have thought that right next to one of America's most famous tourist spots, a new version of Skid Row would exist, just a few steps from the ocean. Venice Beach in 2025 is increasingly overshadowed by homelessness and violence that have escalated to alarming levels. The owner of a Ben & Jerry's store here said he was once attacked by a homeless man in broad daylight. Just a few weeks later, a serious brawl broke out right in front of the shop, leading him to decide to close permanently. "It's not the Venice I used to know anymore," he said in dismay. Homeless encampments are becoming increasingly dense along the coastal path, and the situation is spiraling out of control for the police. A tent fire involving homeless people on the street once burned down an entire building next door. Law enforcement agencies can barely intervene deeply. They issue tickets to the homeless for illegal tenting, even though the people living in those fabric castles can't possibly afford half a penny of the fine. They didn't disappear. They simply moved from one street corner to another, continuing to rebuild their fragile lives on the sidewalks. Venice, once known as a creative, vibrant neighborhood where the elderly walked their dogs and artists painted on brick walls, is now quietly transforming into a new Skid Row. Shops are closing down in droves. Tourists are scarce. Elderly people are almost non-existent, or if they are found on the sidewalks or in dilapidated shacks. Maybe they're scared, or they simply no longer have the strength to walk through a place that was once a golden memory, now just a sad reality. It's noteworthy that many homeless people in Venice are not locals. They come from states further away, where the weather is harsh, housing prices are unattainable, and the welfare system is too complex. California, with its year-round warm climate, became their final destination, where they hoped to find it easier to breathe. But instead of finding a place to be reborn, they only found another version of a dead end. Beautiful to tourists and desperate for the residents who actually live in the area. Perhaps nothing is more painful than the contrast between past and present. Venice has been the backdrop for famous films like White Men Can't Jump Cobra American History X, and has hosted the likes of Charlie Chaplin, Tupac, The Doors. Those vibrant frames are now filled with tents, trash-broken belongings, and the weary eyes of people with nowhere else to go. Despite some government efforts to address the issue, such as resettlement, sidewalk cleaning, and camp relocation to designated areas, the situation has not significantly improved. The number of homeless people hasn't decreased. They've just dispersed to more locations, making the problem more simmering and harder to identify than ever before. Venice Beach, once an icon of tourism, art and history, is slowly becoming a symbol of a social crisis that California can no longer hide. When a place that once represented freedom and openness becomes a dark zone that no one dares to visit, is it not only a neighborhood that is collapsing, but also the very cracks within communities once considered the most desirable in America? If Los Angeles by day offers a sense of vibrancy and modernity, stepping into Skid Row at midnight is like entering a completely different world. A world without light, without rules, and without hope. On streets just a few blocks from the financial center, rows of makeshift tents stretch out like a mapless slum. Each tent is a life, pieced together from nylon tarps, scraps of fabric, wooden pallets, and anything that can hold its shape against the night wind. The smell of mildew garbage and cooking smoke rising from the makeshift kitchens mingled with the cold air, creating a familiar scent that only those who have slept outdoors truly recognize. Skid Row was once considered the humanitarian epicenter of Los Angeles, the area with the most shelters relief organizations and social support programs in the entire city. But precisely because of this, it also became the place with the highest concentration of people who had nowhere else to go. When support capacity is overwhelmed, what was once considered temporary shelter becomes a long-term residence for thousands. And as programs gradually ran out of funding and support staff dwindled, Skid Row was no longer a refuge, but an organized area of abandonment. According to data from the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, the area currently has over 2,500 people living outdoors in substandard conditions. Over the past year, incidents related to violence, theft and accidents here have increased by over 30%, especially at night, when the lighting is dim and police presence is almost non-existent. As dusk began to hide in the shadows of night, it was also the time when people moved slowly, as if sleepwalking, their eyes silently avoiding the lens, neither afraid nor expectant. That was the look of people accustomed to being invisible, accustomed to society passing them by as if they were a crack in the sidewalk. Amidst the campsite, a 62-year-old man, formerly a long-haul truck driver. An accident left him unable to continue driving, and from then on, everything fell apart. No income, no insurance, no home. I used to think I was a strong person, he shared. But when the three most important things disappear at the same time, health, job, and housing, trust also vanishes with them. Now he lives next to a charity food distribution station, sleeps on a tarp, and uses 3 bricks to block the wind from his tent home. On the wall opposite where he lay was the crudely spray-painted message, "Nobody cares." Skid Row isn't scary because of poverty. It's scary because the feeling of being forgotten is institutionalized. When an area with thousands of people is unprotected, uncared for, and not even mentioned on the development map, it is no longer an accident, but a form of collective choice. No politician mentions Skid Row during election campaigns. No investors have set foot here, and very few Los Angeles residents consider this part of their city. That feeling, that society as a whole has tacitly agreed to let this place exist as a grey area, is what makes people shudder more than any statistical figures. If Skid Row is located right in the middle of Los Angeles, one of the wealthiest and most famous cities in the world, and has been neglected for decades, what does that say about the values we used to be proud of? Perhaps while we were busy dazzling the surface, an entire community was left out of the light without anyone speaking up. Once considered a temporary solution, the blue and red tents erected along the roadside are now quietly becoming a permanent symbol of America's urban crisis. They sprout up in parks along riverbanks, under overpasses next to bus stops, and even in front of schools, like unsightly blemishes on the face of a city once called paradise. Places that were only supposed to exist for a few days to provide temporary shelter from the wind and rain now stand there for many years. The old dilapidated tents, patched together with plastic tarps, cardboard boxes, and scrap wood, are no longer rain shelters, they are homes. In Los Angeles, there are dozens of publicly documented homeless encampments, but the actual number could be much higher. According to the latest reports, approximately 62% of LA's homeless population lives outdoors, without shelter, temporary rooms, or restrooms. They exist on the margins, without records, without security, without an official address on paper. In a country with a world-leading GDP, this is not just an anomaly. It's a silent indictment of how modern society prioritizes things. These tent cities develop according to their own rules. Wherever they are cleared, they move to another location. When the police arrived to issue tickets for illegal camping, those people simply rolled up their tarps, moved their carts a few blocks, and set everything back up from scratch. And so the problem was passed from street to street, from park to parking lot, but was never addressed at its root. Shelter systems are often overcrowded, have cumbersome procedures, require paperwork proof of address, or strict check-in times that many homeless people cannot meet. Even with housing, the cost of living in California still forces them back onto the streets. The existence of these mapless cities creates a two-tiered America within the same county. On one side are the brightly lit Whole Foods stores and neatly parked electric cars, while on the other are tarpaulin-covered tents, overturned trash cans, and makeshift stoves shielded by cardboard boxes. That contrast is no longer accidental. It has become the default landscape where injustice has blended into the urban architecture, coexisting with office buildings, 24/7 gyms, and organic coffee shops. The longer it's left, the more the problem becomes normalized. Like a crack that no one repairs, it just spreads little by little. Once the community has learned to live with tents on the sidewalks, with passing by dead bodies, without looking back, it's not just housing that is lost, but also a society's ability to react to what is wrong. If we can count every lost penny in the budget, every quarterly growth indicator, every technological advancement, and yet we can't count how many people will have nowhere to sleep tonight, aren't we measuring the wrong things? Amidst the cramped rows of tents and garbage-strewn pathways of homeless encampments, there's something not easily seen with the naked eye, yet strikingly evident in the eyes' gestures and even the uncontrolled behaviors of many who live there, a silent, widespread mental breakdown that no one truly intervenes in. Mental health, which deserves as careful attention as any physical wound, is being treated as an unnecessary burden in the current social support system. Clear signs can be seen. Conversations, with no one to talk, to sudden shouts, echoing in the night, meaningless repetitive actions on the sidewalk. But instead of receiving early treatment or intervention, these individuals are left to fend for themselves until they become a threat to themselves or the surrounding community. Only then did the system begin to act, but not through doctors or therapists, but through handcuffs, police cars, or overcrowded mental hospitals. From the late 1970s, the United States began to deinstitutionalize large-scale mental health facilities for humanitarian purposes, to return patients to the community. However, what has never been fully developed is a network of alternative community-based treatments. County mental health clinics are underfunded, outpatient medication, and therapy programs are shrinking. Social workers are overworked, and patients, once discharged, have almost nowhere to continue treatment. As a result, hundreds of thousands of people were no longer monitored, and a large percentage of them fell into homelessness. Not everyone who becomes homeless has mental health issues, but living in a state of insecurity, chronic sleep deprivation, and complete loss of control over one's personal life. This is the ideal environment for such problems to arise or escalate. When people are deprived of the feeling of being heard, respected, and protected, they not only lose their homes, but also lose themselves. If a disoriented person is no longer lucid enough to seek help on their own, and society doesn't proactively reach out, can we still call that a care system? Or is it just a machine waiting for an incident to react? There was a time when the neighborhoods of Los Angeles were where everyone wanted to live. Clean, peaceful, shaded by trees with streetlights shining brightly every evening. The government once boasted about its urban management capabilities, from mowing park lawns on schedule to repairing potholes within 48 hours of a report. But those times are over. And what is rising to replace it is not a more modern metropolis, but a city that is slowly but irreversibly dismantling itself piece by piece. What was once considered basic public service, like on-time garbage collection, streetlight repair, grass cutting, and public restroom maintenance, has now become a rare privilege found only in a few upscale residential areas. Other neighborhoods are slowly sinking into dust, garbage, wild vegetation, and streets where the weak yellow streetlights are not enough to make people feel safe stepping outside after 8 p.m. Many elderly people living in the older areas of Venice Mid-City and South LA share that they no longer go outside as much as they used to. Not because of their health, but because of the increasingly pervasive sense of insecurity. Meanwhile, the local authorities are in a state of passive defense. They couldn't control the situation, but they also didn't want to be seen as oppressive or overly interfering in the sensitive area. Cases of tent evictions, police intervention, or the use of enforcement forces have faced strong public backlash, leading authorities to gradually choose to remain silent, observe, and wait for the situation to self-correct. But the problem is, in collapsing regions, inaction is an option. And that was the wrong choice. Worse, this devastation didn't happen after a disaster. There are no earthquakes. There is no war. There is no global pandemic causing this. It took place peacefully amidst democracy, amidst 5-year plans, and between an America that was still talking about its role as global leader. That's what many people find shocking, because the city wasn't ruined by a lack of money, but by a lack of political will to preserve the most decent aspect of how a society functions: minimal care for all. If the government no longer dares to enter its own streets, cannot repair a lamppost, cannot protect a park, then who is really running the city? And more profoundly, can a city still exist when its very administrators have quietly withdrawn? In a country renowned for its legal system and detailed plans, few would expect that housing and homelessness policies would be a patchwork of inconsistencies where temporary solutions are used as if they were long-term strategies. And the result is tens of thousands of people trapped in a vicious cycle with no way out. One of the biggest problems today lies in the inconsistency between different levels of government, federal, state, and city, each with its own budget regulations, goals, and its own crises. While the federal government is rolling out housing assistance grant packages, many states like California lack practical implementation mechanisms. Hundreds of millions of dollars are allocated to programs supporting the homeless, but most of it is spent on administrative costs, office rent surveys, record keeping, and policy consulting, instead of reaching those who need it most. A clear example is the shelter system. Designed as temporary housing for the homeless, in reality, many people get stuck in this system for months. Because they wanted to qualify for stable temporary housing, they needed to go through a series of screenings, personal documents, proof of homelessness, health records, background checks, which most homeless people, who no longer have assets or documents, cannot meet. As a result, they had to choose either sleep in street camps or live in temporary, non-private, insecure, time-limited, and unclear locations. These gaps not only cause the homeless to lose faith in the system, they also gradually erode society's ability to respond. When people see tax money being spent without results, they lose patience. When politicians find an issue too complex, they avoid it. When charities are overwhelmed, they narrow their scope. And when no one trusts anyone anymore, everything stops in silence while thousands of people continue to sleep on the streets every night. When policies designed to help the vulnerable inadvertently push them further away from the system's embrace, the question isn't how much budget is there? It's what are we truly prioritizing in building a caring society? We just walk together through streets where no one should have to live. From Skid Row to Venice Beach, from nameless tent camps to street corners where police no longer dare to go. This journey is not meant to judge, nor is it meant to instill fear. It's simply a mirror, reflecting a part of America that we often turn away from, finding it too complex, too sad, or too difficult to accept. None of those people were born to live in tents. No one chooses to wander the city every night because it's a lifestyle. And no one should have to sacrifice their dignity just to have a place to stay for the night. But the most thought-provoking thing is that it's still happening right in the middle of one of the richest, most famous, and freest cities in the world. If what you just watched resonated with you in any way, please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to tell stories that not everyone is willing to listen to, but everyone needs to know. Each share is an opportunity to add one more person who understands, one more person who cares, and one more ray of hope for those whose lives are lived in silence. This video is not intended to condemn any organization, individual, or political group. All information presented is based on publicly available data, official reports, and field observations from multiple perspectives. The stories, images, and perspectives presented are educational in nature, reflecting social realities to stimulate constructive discussion without creating incitement, panic, or stereotyping. We do not condone any illegal behavior whatsoever. We do not normalize suffering, and we do not turn human misery into entertainment. This is not a conclusion, but an invitation to reflect together, to dialogue together, and to hold on to the remaining humanity within each of us.